iOS 17 app sideloading might only be available in Europe. Apple being motivated by improving security RBS. And it pains me to see people in this forum falling for it, or repeating this. There is a great tool to increase security. The browser and its sandbox. You don't need to install anything fishy on your phone, and the sandbox rights can't be sufficient for many apps. But as an example, Apple denies the full screen feature for websites, and even PWA, only installed ones. There's no good reason except favoring Apps App Store. For security. Works great on Android. And you cannot use a third-party browser, since they forbid that, all are Safari-based. Thank you, EU.
And you cannot use a third-party browser, since they forbid that, all are Safari-based. I think this has turned out to be the current barrier in preventing Google from taking over the web standard space.
Users don't want crappy PWAs, they want something that follows the platform UI conventions. It's good that Apple care enough about UX to actually enforce this.
If they want it, download the app then. Allow others to not download it and use a PWA if they'd like. Actually, I believe you're wrong. If people actually preferred Apple's way of doing it, Apple would have no reason to restrict other ways. They restrict it because people prefer the other way, and that would harm Apple's profits.
I wonder if they considered an iPhone Europe edition. USB-C, side-loading physical SIM cards. Sounds like a good phone.
What's good about physical SIMs? I do like Apple for daring to improve the status quo there, so I want my European edition with only eSIMs.
The last time I dropped my phone and broke its screen, I took out the SIM and left the phone in a repair shop. I went home, put the SIM in an old phone. If the broken phone had an eSIM, would I have been able to use the old one as a backup? Maybe by going to a shop and asking for a physical SIM. That would be slower and less convenient. A physical SIM fits in a Samsung A40, which is probably the smaller and lighter Android phone available today, and in much smaller phones of the past, so it's definitely not a burden.
If your old phone was also eSIM compatible, you can just download the eSIM from your carrier, like you would if you moved to any other phone.
That I can just take the SIM out and put it in a different phone. What's the migration process for eSIMs?
From the article. In addition, developers may have to pay extra if they want their apps to be available outside of the iOS App Store, Gurman says. The statement is a bit ambiguous. Is it pay Apple extra, or pay extra to the third party to have their app listed in the third-party App Store? The former doesn't sound right. It is probably FUD. Logically, a third-party app store could compete on significantly reduced fees relative to Apple, as one of the strategies. Those conscious of the quantum of current fees then have options of listing their app on both the Apple App Store and the third-party store as part of their distribution strategy. Customers who trust the Apple App Store would get their app from there, and those who like a third-party app store would get it from there. The app developer would have reduced their total fees for distribution. Even if there are sign-up fees, the share of revenues that Apple is today taking away from the developer would go down in absolute terms with a third-party store. As far as the consumer is concerned, this becomes an OS setting like default browser, default text editor, etc. Apple sticking to only the Apple App Store stance is only raising the cost for consumers. Consumers in other geographies will also wake up. Eventually.
Hasn't Apple always said the reason they don't allow sideloading was that it'd be impossible without compromising security? So are they claiming their European iDevices won't be secure anymore? Or are they admitting they were lying before, and that the real reason was nothing but greed?
I think Apple has also done good things with their strict App Store policies, from my consumer point of view. Apple has been, for example, putting limits on data collection and tracking. The main mechanism is to kick apps out from App Store if they don't play by the rules. I'm worried that sideloading will be a step back here. Strong players like Facebook may just take their app away from the official store and distribute it through other ways. With their strong position, I don't have much choice. It's not like there would be 5 competing apps serving the same purpose, connecting to the people and communities on Facebook.
This is naive. Apple doesn't protect you. The prime example is that Apple gives apps unfettered access to network connections. And you are unable to block this in any meaningful way. What Apple doesn't give you is the ability to manage your own phone. You cannot really manage what apps are doing yourself. You cannot even find out what apps are doing. And you definitely will not be able to manage Apple apps. They get a free pass in all ways. But yes, if there's a sideloaded Facebook app or a Facebook store, you will be given more rope to do with as you want.
I don't have much choice. I hope I don't come across as snarky. I am genuinely curious. But why don't you have a choice? Are you unable to contact friends, family, etc. any other way outside of FB? The phrasing seems so strong. I'm second guessing if I'm just privileged, lucky, location, friend, family circumstances, etc. to be off of social media, but still have friends and family that I stay connected to. Edit. Fixed grammar.
I would normally agree with you, but a friend of mine is an immigrant from a Southeast Asian nation, and the only way to easily communicate is through Facebook with the family there. It's like saying, sure, we can take away your phone and you can still write letters. But at some point, communication is also about convenience.
Can't this friend install something else on his phone? Signal maybe.
I think the central question here is whether you buy a phone as a piece of hardware and then own that hardware, which gives you certain rights regarding the usage of that owned hardware. Or whether you are just paying some sort of admission fee to a tightly controlled service and are basically lent a piece of hardware that you have no ownership rights over. All the other stuff about walled gardens, monopolies, and security is related, but still acts as a red herring when discussing what rights a person should get for a piece of hardware they bought.
As far as I'm concerned, if you bought something, it should be yours to do as you please, including reselling and destroying it. If you didn't buy something, but rented it, for example a game on Steam or Epic Game Store, then it should damned say so. It's a straight-up lie to say you purchased something if you didn't.
If you didn't buy something, but rented it, for example a game on Steam or Epic Game Store. I don't know about the other one, but in the Steam store I see buy buttons, not rent. Buy in the store page, then when you go a shopping cart, where you can purchase the game. To me, and to the average people, I guess, it doesn't sound as a rental service at all. I'm sure that their TOS says otherwise, but I wonder how it would fare in a court case.
I don't think those alternatives are the right ones. You can sell your phone without any issue. There are plenty of stores around me offering to buy used models to resell. I'm actually contemplating buying a used model. Can't do that with Steam games. I'm also pretty confident that if Apple and their services disappeared tomorrow, my phone would keep on working just like it does today. Sure, no more updates, no more new apps, it would be frozen in the state it's in. Therefore, I think the question is whether an iPhone is a general computing device or an appliance. I can see the arguments for both, even though I tend to treat mine as the latter.
Games on Steam are not rented.
Yes. The HN crowd is overcomplicating the issue, and Apple has as much a right as an individual to design their platform as they wish. We like to talk about giving businesses the freedom to build the products that they want and keeping regulators out of the picture, and instead letting people vote with their money. Yet when people actually vote with their money to buy Apple products, precisely for how they are built, we want to regulate the crap out of the company. It doesn't make sense.
Related question. What does the user want? I doubt a majority of users are against sideloading.
Even if this is small progress, the headlines and framing of the story are still doublespeak. Installing applications on your computer is the normal state of things. Walled gardens and not having control of your computer is the new weird thing. The word sideloading is a feudal concept, and its unquestioned use is dangerous for society. Properly stated, this story title is, Installing Applications on iOS 17 Might Be Allowed Europe, which highlights the absurdity intrinsic in the practice of users not being able to install applications on their own computers as a default.
I used to think the same way, but not anymore. The amount and variety of attacks on the devices have increased too much in the last years. The device could be encrypted, money could be stolen, some malware could sit silently and do surveillance for who knows. I always wanted to install software on my iPhone, without the manufacturing company deciding what I can and cannot have, according to Californian standards, but would I let my kids do that nowadays? No way. Stay on the app stores, also on Windows and macOS, is the first line of defense. It's sad but the safest approach. Regular users don't need to install software on their own anymore. The same as they don't need to put processors, storage and monitors together, or install a sound card.
Even on Windows, if I send an X or MSI of my software to someone, they get a scary security warning that prevents them from running it. The only guaranteed way around that is to be a big company or a big open source project. If security really mattered, every OS would run applications in a proper sandbox. But why bother with that when you can just point your web browser at a program running on someone else's server? Oh, but consent to these tracking cookies first.
They get a scary security warning that prevents them from running it. The huge difference is that's only a warning, and not a cryptographically locked down system unlike Apple's.
Installing whatever you want on your computer is not necessarily the natural state. It's not even how the industry started, and it's not how any other industry or devices work. I also prefer to be able to do whatever I want with my own devices, but pretending like it's an inalienable right, or a natural state, or has no disadvantages, is disingenuous and not helpful to the debate.
I anticipate a huge market developing for unlocked second-hand European iPhones in the US.
As the developer of a subscription app, if unfettered sideloading is allowed, I'd be worried about cracked versions of my app being distributed. We've done everything in the client for privacy and reliability, but the obvious countermeasure would be to move functionality over to a backend. This would be history echoing the transition from boxed software to SaaS.
Flagged?
No. Preventing people from doing something for their own good is never the right solution. Instead, we should strive to educate people on proper online safety measures so that they don't fall victim to fraudulent attempts. Reply.